Journey with Rachel Wandishin, and she is a very visible member of St. Joseph's. She's involved with lots of things, and so she has a story to tell us as well on the journey. So welcome, Rachel. We're glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You know, you grew up Catholic, you went to a Catholic school, but that wasn't quite enough to seal the deal for you, apparently. So can you tell us a little about that? Something was missing, and you repeated that many times. So what was it about that upbringing that didn't really convince you yet that you wanted to be Catholic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit imposter syndrome. Like, I was just trying to be Catholic and not really believing the actions that I was doing. Like, I really wanted to be a good student, a good daughter, a good granddaughter, sister, all of that stuff. And I thought I believed. It really didn't stick. So
you went through the motions, you did what you thought you should do.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, we were every Sunday going to Mass, even on vacation, which a lot of people don't do. I would go to vacation. My favorite church in the entire world is in Briston, North Carolina.
Okay.
It's right on the water. It really just has like all the windows and stuff. It's really pretty. I loved going there. And that's where we would go when we were on vacation. But you know, I went to Catholic school, I got that great theology, like, foundation and everything.
Yeah, which a lot of us don't get.
Right.
So, good for you.
And I felt really lucky to be going there, and I would come here as a youth and a teen and be involved in youth group and just, like, other various, like, youth ministry activities. And when I got confirmed, I really thought that I was, like, doing this, and this is what I wanted to do.
But what was missing?
You know, I don't really know, but I think it was the relationship aspect of it. I wasn't really great at praying. Besides just like, you know, your prayer before meals and all of that kind of stuff. So, and I don't think that I had that relationship with God that was gonna keep the faith with me.
Keep the fire burning. Well, you know, a lot of people might describe a relationship with God as something sort of strange, and how would you even know what that means? What would you then say it felt like you were missing? Communication? I mean, you talked about praying. Was it a communication that you were missing? Or how would you describe that void?
Yeah, it's probably communication. You know, I had the community. The community was there. I had it in my family. You know, my dad's side of the family was Catholic. My mom's was Methodist. But even so, like, my grandparents on my mom's side, really, really, really strong in their faith. And I had that community on both sides and here at St. Joseph's. But I think that it was just... it felt fake. Mm-hmm. It felt forced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was all around you, but not in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, that's a really good way to describe it. And yet I think there are a lot of people that never get further than that.
Yeah.
And so not everybody knows what they're missing. So looking back, you obviously knew. Now, you say you struggled in college, was it, with your faith? And I mean, a lot of people do that.
Mm-hmm.
How can you tell us about that struggle? What was the struggle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of an Eldersburg bubble that occurs. And I went to college in New York City. So while I had known people of various different backgrounds growing up, they weren't, like, outwardly of those backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first time that I was encountering, like, anybody from the LGBT community or homelessness, or really just, like, getting to know people of other faiths that would, like, that was not Christianity, and really having to like struggle with those aspects of Catholicism and of Christianity while being like, well, I know these people are great, like I love these people, they are my friends, so like can I really truly believe that like X is a sin or Y is a sin?
So it challenged what you believed because you got outside of what you were used to looking at.
Yeah.
Which I think everybody needs to do. It's a good thing to do. And struggling is a lot. Like the sermon that came out not that long ago on doubting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's our doubting or our struggling that really creates, you know, the outcome or the fruit of the struggle. So you've described it several times. I counted them in your bio to me that it was at least 3 times that you said I struggled. Another way you said I didn't have the relationship. The 3rd time you said nothing was there. And so you were obviously searching for something.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like one night when you didn't want to cook dinner was the beginning of something. Well, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I went to college in New York, came back home really like depressed, really confused, didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even have a job. I just came home by default.
That sounds rough. I think a lot of us do that.
And, you know, got a job, started working. I was living at home. I eventually moved out to Catonsville, and I was living in a house on the 3rd floor, and everybody that lived in the house was Catholic, and I felt again like an imposter because I was like so far removed. While I was at college, everything at Mass changed. We had that change in sayings and stuff that happened in 2011, and that was a rude awakening to my parents that like I had not been at church when I couldn't say the responses correctly.
Well, that sounds like a rough time too.
Yeah.
My gosh.
So, but yeah, so I moved out and, you know, started going back to church and helping with the Sunday 5 p.m. Because that's when my family was going, and it was really just the same thing as when I was a teenager, something to fill the time. It filled the hour while I was there. But then one night, about 3.5 years ago or so, my roommate at the time, she mentioned that her mom was helping to start something at St. Joe's, and she was interested if I wanted to join her because she was coming basically out of pure obligation to her mother to come. And it was a Thursday night, and I didn't want to cook dinner. So we stopped for food. And it turned out that thing was Kikoya.
And Kikoya, go ahead, say it.
Carroll County Young Adults. Which is the young adult group here at St. Joseph's. And, you know, I went there and I didn't even think anything of it. It was just another thing to do, a thing to fill 2 hours of the evening. But over time, you know, I made great friends and built great community there. And, you know, started actually wanting to go to Mass and wanting to develop a prayer life and wanting to explore Catholicism really deep and get to know it and take it as my own.
Wow, so that group of people, let me just check and see if this is right, because it sounds a little bit like me. You know, I was a preacher's kid growing up, and so I had to go to church all the time, did all the things, you know, and then I saw people that did it because they wanted to, and that was a head turner. And I'm wondering if that was sort of your experience. You saw these people in Kikoya, and they wanted to, they didn't have to.
Yeah.
Was that part of what made a difference?
Yeah, and they were really there because they wanted to be, they wanted to have that community. And they were really just so on fire with their faith that I wanted that. I wanted it so bad. But I didn't want to just go in as imposter Rachel and pretend to be Catholic again and pretend to do this all over again. So I really started like studying and reading the Bible, which I really never done before.
It's not a big Catholic thing for people to do, you know, so you're not alone there.
So, and getting to know the Gospels and story of Genesis and reading Isaiah and all of that just really just sparked so much fire in my soul that, like, it's crazy that one night where you don't want to cook dinner can just spiral into something that I never thought was possible. You know, when I was in college, I was really struggling, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know if I'm like ready to just straight up give up on God, but I think I'm done to give up on Catholicism. And so, like, do I need to go exploring other Christianity religions and all of that? Or just other religions in general that, you know, have a name for God, but it might not be God.
So all this time you were looking for God, and you were even willing to leave your faith to do that, but you didn't need to.
No.
So I guess what we would call this, in a way, it led up to you encountering, is what we call it a lot, having an encounter with who God is. Not what he's like or all about him, but him, right? And you're saying you found it through the Old Testament. That's really unusual.
Yeah.
What was it about the Old Testament that seemed to interest you?
I think it was in almost every single book in the Old Testament. Somebody screws up, and they screw up majorly. And, like, that's just such comfort for me, because in the end, God is always like, you know, you did screw up, you need to pay consequences for that, but, like, I still love you, and I haven't let you go.
That's like a big hug. I just got goosebumps. So that was really what made a big difference for you.
Yeah.
Wow. That really pushes past the outward obligations and just what they call works, right? It's not about what you do. It's about connecting and really understanding that God loves you.
Yeah.
In a big, big, deep way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you've got all these ministries. And I think in your bio you said, oh, wait a minute, here it was. It says, these are my ministries. So you really own them. And ministry is really important. Do you want to tell us what that means to you and why it's so important?
Yeah.
I mean, you spend a lot of time here. And it's wonderful. Not everybody would do that. What intrigues you and calls you there?
I mean, I think people say that I'm, like, too involved. But
you're not listening to them.
I'm not listening to them. No, I think that this church and this community have really taken me under their wing and have become my family. And I just want to serve them. I want to, like, help shepherd them in their own faith journeys, and so that everybody can have what I had. So I think it's just really important. You know, when people say that they, like, don't have a faith journey or whatever, I'm like, no, you do. You have experienced so much journey, even if you don't see it, in your lifetime, whether you are 5 years old or 95 years old. You have had this journey, and people have helped you along the way, and I want to be one of those people. I want to serve. I don't know, it's just like a ministry of servitude, I guess. And so I over-involve myself. I guess that's the blessing of being single. You just have all this
Well,
free
yeah,
time.
you've got the opportunity, but I think it's a calling to give yourself that way that we all really have. It's not just meant for people that are single or whoever.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all sort of meant to give back, in the words of another person I've talked to recently. So what would you suggest for people if they're considering getting involved, but they're holding back because they're like, no, I don't want to spend my free time that way? Would you say anything to them?
I think put in as much time as you want. Don't neglect your prayer life, but put in as much time as you want, because it will just exponentially grow within yourself. If you put in 5 minutes a week, it's gonna feel like 500 times of love. So imagine putting in an hour too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, God will give it back to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you will feel so fulfilled. Even more so than maybe the ones that you're serving.
Yeah, it's not just for those people. It's always a very mutual thing. God blesses both people.
Yeah.
Well, your ministries have really blessed a lot of people. Your involvement has blessed a lot of people. I did have one more question though, and it was about that prayer life, because you just said it again. It reminded me that you didn't have a prayer life, and now you're encouraging people to pray. And I'm wondering what changed for you in how you would describe your prayer life. What's the difference between then and now?
I think it's like, and this sounds really terrible, but I think it's like any habit. You just have to make the time to do it, and eventually it does become a habit, and your day doesn't feel fulfilled if you don't fulfill that habit. And so that's really where I started, is I just started setting aside 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and then it just kind of formed into more like organized time of like, oh, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes every morning, like just doing something, even if it's just screaming at God because I'm so angry, or if it's like reading the Bible or just journaling or anything like that. And it's almost exploring different types of prayer. Which is like something that I guess never knew about. Maybe I knew about it when I was growing up, but I just didn't pay attention
So
to
like
that
what?
part.
What would you say are different types of prayer?
Yeah, so like when I grew up, it was like, okay, pray the Our Father, you pray the Hail Mary, like you pray the Glory Be, you pray the Rosary, you pray before meals, like all of that is like very like just organized prayer like that. But what has really blossomed so much in the past 3 years or so is like sitting in silence and not doing anything, or like reading the Bible as a form of prayer and not just I'm reading a story.
So it sounds like you're saying reading the Bible as a form of prayer, or any of it, is just slow down and be there, right? Well, you described wanting that relationship with God, and we then talked about it being communication, and so now we're talking about prayer, and so I think we put this all together. That if you want a relationship with God, you need to communicate like with a friend or anybody. You need to talk to him every now and then, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you get pretty far apart. And so now you're saying that prayer is your way of communicating. And I like the fact that you even talk about screaming.
Yeah.
So God takes screamers too?
Yeah. At least I hope so.
Well, I think he does. I mean, he loves us beyond measure. I mean, think of all the screw-ups in the Old Testament.
Right.
If he took all of them, then I think he can take a little screaming.
Right. And it's like any type of friendship that you have arguments with people, you have quote-unquote fights.
Yeah.
And, working through all the questions, there's a lot of questions. And, like, I don't have all the answers. I don't know anybody that does. And working through those questions, sometimes you can go down a spiral hole and you can be like, well, why? and get so frustrated at the bottom of that hole.
You
that
mean with
just
God
need-
even?
Yeah,
Mhm.
that you just need to scream.
Yeah. And it's okay. And you know, what I've heard is that as you're praying with some of those things that feel like a big spiral hole, sometimes when you're asking why, or if you ask for something and you don't seem to get an answer, the answer is either no or wait.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not like he's not hearing, it's just not yet. Right?
Right. And if anything, I've learned that the plan's not going to go your way, but there's always a plan.
Mm.
Even if you don't go to Mass for 4 years, practically, and you have, quote unquote, given up on Catholicism, there's always a plan, and he's not going to let you stray from that plan.
Mm. So you're saying he has the big picture,
Yeah.
and he has things sort of under control in a
Yeah.
good way. Wonderful. Well, Rachel, it's been wonderful talking to you and hearing your story. I love it. I think it's a very encouraging story for so many people. And your ministry has blessed a lot of people, and I'm sure will continue to do that. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was fun.
Good. And so we thank her, and we look forward to the next journey that we get to hear about, and hope that you've been blessed by today's story.